Julie Jacob from Indy Parks is just going to kick us off today. Thanks everyone for being here.
All right, we are live and in person at Riverside Adventure Park. Really happy that you've all allowed us to spend some time with you this afternoon. This would be our third and final meeting of the schematic design phase of the Riverside Adventure Park plan. Since our last meeting, I think that was in January, made a lot of additions and refinements to the plan. Sarah and her team will be doing a presentation of all those new ideas. Next steps after we talk about the actual plan, we'll get an idea of what the budget for all of these great ideas will be. And then we are hoping that maybe we can brainstorm with you on what you think might be some of the best things that we could do first to really get the park activated. We will be also going to the park board to get their approval, and we hope really to be able to start looking at designing some of the features very soon. So I'll turn it over to Sarah, and thank you for being here.
Hi, everyone. As Julie mentioned, my name is Sarah Evans. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to go ahead and start off with a round robin sort of check-in, just to say hi to everyone, since we've got a combo of in person here from the former clubhouse, and then the folks joining us virtually. So I'll kick it off here in the room, and we'll start just immediately to my right. Maybe if you can share your name, who you're with, that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey guys, I'm Nathan Smurden, representing 913 Sports. We're a youth-focused educational nonprofit that moved into the nearby neighborhood just 2 years ago. So thanks for letting us be here.
Awesome.
I'm with Nathan, also with 1913 Sports. My name is Aaron Coombs.
Awesome. Nigel?
My name is Nigel Long, here as a co-chair of the Northwest Landing neighborhood, formerly Northwest Civic neighborhood. Excited to be here. This is really awesome.
And Katie?
I'm Katie Dorsey. I'm here from Riverside High School.
Okay, great. And then let's kick it over to the folks who are joining us virtually. I'll start with Eugene Potter. Oh, Eugene, you're muted.
Okay, Eugene Potter, New Life Development Ministries. We do reentry, 2819 Clifton.
Thank you, Eugene. Bob Getz.
Hi, it's Bob Getz with the Indianapolis Soapbox Derby. Happy to be on the call.
Thanks, Bob. And then Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Britton Watts, president of the Riverside Regional Park Foundation.
Thanks, Michelle. Ted?
How you doing? Ted Hardy, CICF Community Ambassador.
Thanks for joining us. And Kevin Hardy?
Kevin Hardy, Friends of White River. We've been involved with the park and the neighborhood for a number of years.
Great. And then Don Colvin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Don Colvin, Deputy Director, DPW Parks and DPW.
Thank you, Don. And then Pastor Shelby.
Introductions. Hi, I'm Pastor Sean Shelby, pastor at Ebenezer Church.
Great. Thank you for joining us, everyone. And then we've also got Ron Rice. Ron, you want to say hi to folks?
Hi. Wait, this was
You took it literally.
You already said half of my introduction already. Ron Rice, community builder for the Northwest.
Well, thanks again. And I think I saw one more person joining us. Hello, sir.
Hey.
Welcome.
You have to introduce yourself. Andre Denman, park planner and greenways manager.
Great. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. From our last steering committee meeting back in January, you all may recall that we had a plan that was outlined as a pencil sketch. And as Julie touched on, our meeting with several community organizations and stakeholder groups over the past few months. And by having the plan in a sketch form, we were able to kind of push and pull on elements and really tweak them to make them the best they can be based on all of the stakeholder feedback. So what we have today, and we're very excited to share with you all, is an illustrative plan that is based on all of that feedback that we got, building off of the master plan done back in 2017, then refined and confirmed from what we heard in the public survey conducted last fall, vetted through our steering committee, you all folks. So we also have a technical steering committee that we're working with, and then continued to be refined over the past few months through our committee meetings. So the folks here in the room have a hard copy print version of that. There's some boards back here as well with that information. And then after we share this information with you all today, I'll have that up here on our computer screen. Then we will be posting it on our website. So the website will have all of this information that you can review and also share with your neighbors and other stakeholders that you think would be interested in learning this information. So without further ado, we'll get to it. Okay, can you all see the illustrated picture on your screen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
As you might recall from our last steering committee meeting, we have organized the site into different zones based on the program elements. They sort of organize themselves into logical areas based on what can accommodate certain activities. And so down here, the left-hand side of the page has our illustrated site plan. On the right-hand side, there's some narrative that talks about each one of the zones and the vision for it, as well as some representative imagery that accompanies each one of those zones. And we'll zoom into that here in a little bit, as well as some inspiration for the shelter, the different shelters that are found in the park. Over on the left-hand side, though, we have Zone 1 as the river zone. Again, that's due to its proximity to the White River. Zone 2 is over here on the southwest corner of the site, bounded by 30th Street and Cold Spring Road, and it's called the racing zone for the soapbox derby activities that happen from that site. Then Zone 3 is up on top of the hillside, and that's called the winter zone. Zone 4 is that area up north of Crooked Creek, and includes the Indy Cycloplex and Major Taylor Velodrome. It includes the area that was known as Lake Sullivan. And then Zone 5 is what we're calling the Central Nature Zone, and that's the large floodplain landscape that encompasses a lot of the site. So I'll zoom in to each one of the zones for a closer view. All right, thanks for bearing with me through that. And a quick reminder to everyone, if you could please mute yourself, that'd be great. Again, starting down here at the river zone, the 30th Street Bridge is really that primary critical connection to the south portion of Riverside Park and also to the Riverside Promenade project that is ongoing right now. So it's that critical connection. It will also be a project that DPW is undertaking here later this fall to start repairs to that bridge. But as folks come from the southern portion of the park up into this portion of Riverside Park, the river zone is the first thing that they come into. And we wanted to celebrate that entrance through an entry overlook here at that crossing where folks can stand up above the floodplain landscape and look out over the entire river zone. Each one of the zones is anchored by a landmark pavilion structure. So that's something that you'll see in each one of the zones. Here we have a river pavilion. It's envisioned to have restrooms and picnic facilities, some of the basic necessities that folks express a strong need for in the survey feedback that we got, as well as then a stage towards the west end of the pavilion is envisioned for that area, so that can play to the event lawn beyond that. We're building off a lot of the existing infrastructure. So there's the existing parking lot here today, but through our discussions with the folks at Indy Parks and some of the other community groups, the desire and need was expressed to host events from the river zone, very similar to what you might have seen if you came to the event in September, the public event. And so it really functions as an event hub, and we need to accommodate parking from that area. So we've expanded the existing parking lot to about 260 spaces here in the concept. A theme that you'll see throughout the concept is that we're building in connections of the trail system. So a lot of the trails out here today run north and south. These are the former cart paths. And so one of the activities that folks expressed a desire to do in the survey was to just walk and bike on trails. And so you'll see a lot of east and west connections that are made there so that folks can do looping paths throughout the entire site. And then you'll also see a picnic shelter up here towards the north end of the parking lot. There are keynotes sprinkled on the plan. A's indicate those picnic shelters as well. So picnicking was again another activity that folks expressed a desire to do, a gathering with family and friends. So we've placed picnic shelters throughout the site in proximity to the parking areas. That really covers a lot of the river zone. So we wanted to pause at each one of the zones as we presented to just get feedback or questions at this time.
I love the idea of the event. Selfishly, I love the idea of an event pavilion. I think that's really awesome. Obviously, the Taggart is going in down the way, but not all events will be that big or be able to have the capacity to be able to rent or do whatever to use that space. So this could definitely be a good secondary space for that. So that's exciting.
Great,
Thank you.
yeah.
I'll just say that everyone send your love to Riverside High School during the bridge restoration. We're trying to see the long term. We know that it needs to happen, but we haven't even really told our families yet. Like, we'll let them know eventually. And maybe send your love to Riverside too, because the government will be coming down through there, trying to get to school in the morning. It's for this zone one. My only question was about the connection to the foundation building at the marina now, and are there any planned integration between that current building and its progress?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So that area near where the Riverside Marina is, the 30th Street Bridge has the staircase for river access, and a lot of folks groups are using that currently today. So that's envisioned to remain the same with this plan. And we've provided for some crossings from the parking lot to get to the grounds of the former Riverside Marina as well, because we see a lot of cross activity happening there. Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you, Don, for the heads up. So Don was saying it's hard to hear the comments. There was just a question about connectivity to the river here from the park. That's what that was in about.
There, another thing, that's a levy, so there's not a lot we can do to change that.
Yeah.
Right where that is. So.
Yeah. Yeah, Andre brought up a great point that the White River Parkway is a levee, and so that will constrain a lot of what can and cannot be done there.
So one other thing I'll say, just because parents want me to say it every time, they would love someday an ability to turn left. This is really for the DPW. So when you come south on Riverside Parkway West Drive and want to go back east on 30th, just not having a light there makes that left turn really hard. So I don't know what a light would look like there. I don't even know if I want a light there, and I don't know if it's been a part of this planning or not, but it is a spot that it's hard to get back left there.
Katie is mentioning, I think it's this intersection, correct, Katie?
Yep,
This White River
exactly.
Parkway
Yeah.
and 30th Street?
Yep.
Is a challenging intersection, especially if you're coming south and wanting to make a left-hand turn to go east on 30th Street. So thanks for that. I see Michelle Britton Watts has also raised her hand. Michelle, do you have a comment?
I did. I just had a question regarding the shelter usage. Will that process remain the same regarding reserving the usage of that? Or will those not be something that is rented or first come, first serve? What's the plan for the use of the shelters for people that might want to host an event or cookout or something of that nature?
Sure. Yeah, I see our Indy Parks staff nodding their heads.
It would go through our normal rental process.
Normal rental process.
Okay.
We haven't established a fee for it yet.
But there's no established fee yet. Kevin Hardy has a question, comment?
Yeah, it's regarding river access, Sarah. This area is currently used to some degree as an unimproved canoe launch or slightly improved canoe launch. And I know we've talked a little bit about that. There was a reference to construction of the 30th Street Bridge. And I know that's separate, but if given that Don Colvin's on here, there really needs to be during that time period consideration given to signage upstream. There were some major glitches with the Kessler Avenue project and a lack of understanding about where people put in and when they would encounter that type of construction. Is the canoe launch component still as we had talked about earlier, Sarah, or has that changed?
So in working with the Parks Alliance for activation of their site here, the site that they're using across the road from White River Parkway, yes, the concept is still that they would activate these spaces and have, keep the canoe launch river access area intact there.
Okay, so it would be just intact. It wouldn't be improved or enhanced.
Yes, their vision for their master plan would be to enhance that area further.
But that wouldn't be part of this plan then.
Correct.
And we don't know any timeline on that.
No, not at this time.
The safety considerations, I can't stress that enough. There was a drowning at the Emmericksville Dam. Construction is going on the rock ramp beginning this summer downstream from the Lake Indy. And I know we're looking at a particular area as the adventure park, but things that happen upstream and downstream of that are part of that overall recreational pattern and use.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin, I know as part of CEG's project with the rock ramp, they are preparing to put up a series of signage to warn folks what's ahead and when to port. I'll bring that to the transportation group as far as the Kessler Bridge as well, because in all likelihood, that area may be impacted a little bit.
Yeah, we fortunately we were able to convince DPW that there needed to be signage for the Kessler Bridge project at the most popular upstream launch, which is right below the Monon Trail. Their premise was that if you let folks know when they got to the point, that was adequate, and that can be way too late. We've had very productive conversations with Citizens Energy Group regarding their signage, and they are looking at that right there at Lake Indy. They haven't talked about anything up in the area where they don't have responsibility, which would be here. And this would be an area where folks would take out before encountering that, because Lake Indy lot is currently closed for staging, and then although a portage will be conducted, the river itself will be closed off during the time of construction downstream of the Lake Indy launch.
I believe you're gonna, from our last conversations, I believe you're gonna see something right here at this portage.
Very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. What is the Park Alliance?
So the Parks Alliance used to be known as Indianapolis Parks Foundation, and they recently underwent a name change, but they work hand in hand with the Indy Park staff and help fundraising for projects.
And they're located in the marina.
Yes, their offices are located now over here in the Riverside Marina. Okay, we're gonna keep moving up then to the racing zone. And again, that zone is anchored by a landmark pavilion or building. And in talking with the Soapbox Derby folks, they have a vision for a building that would occur at this location. It's a two-part building in some ways. One is the backside of the building, which would be very utilitarian, have a lot of storage for their cars, potentially an indoor practice area. And then the front of the building is a landmark pagoda type structure that would announce the area, possibly some space for a museum, but then again, it would have restrooms for park users. It's supported by a plaza space for gathering outside of the building, a parking area that would serve Soapbox Derby events that comes in off of Cold Spring Road. You'll notice that the parking was moved from along 30th Street to closer to that building. And that came from a lot of the safety concerns of getting in and out of that parking area right off of the light here at 30th Street and Cold Spring Road. The entrance here at this corner, at the southwest corner of the park, is enhanced with an entry plaza, and at the entry plazas to the site, we envision signage to help people wayfinding into different destinations throughout the park, potentially a bike share so that, you know, folks coming in from outside of the park can land there and then find their way to different spots within the park. A fitness trail is envisioned also for this corner of the park. One of the another comment that we heard often in our survey was that folks wanted to have a place for outdoor recreation, and so that's one of the amenities to allow that to happen in a formalized way. Although I know there are folks in the room who are using Soapbox Derby, the incline on the track for their outdoor fitness already today. And then at the bottom here of Soapbox Derby Hill at the Finish Line Plaza, we've really just formalized that gathering spot for all of the activities that happen on race day events. There's a trailhead here again with some wayfinding signage opportunities that leads you right into the trail system from that point. An RC track is envisioned down here at the bottom of this hill to play off of the racing theme as well. It's supported with a track stand for any RC track events that would happen there. And again, that's an electric or a battery operated remote control vehicle on a dirt track is the element proposed for that area. Then at the top of the racing zone, just north of the Soapbox Derby area, again, you'll see more picnic shelters here to support that picnicking activity. And then we lead into the trail system around the 4.5 acre dog park up here on top of the hill. That trail system will dive into the woods here just north of the Soapbox Derby building. You'll see that little dip into the woods where the former bear pit was once located. And again, that could be a potential spot for some informational, educational signage there to talk about the history of the site. The dog park has a shelter. You'll see keynote B to indicate park shelters. Those are different from picnic shelters. You know, again, as a place for folks to get out of the either sun or, you know, if it's misting, they can get out of the inclement weather. Any questions on the racing zone before we move on? Or thoughts, comments?
So the building that's the long rectangular structure there appears to be fairly sizable. Is the vision that that is solely going to be used to support the Soapbox Derby racing activity, or will it be a multi-purpose building that parks could potentially rent out as a facility, as an example?
So the size and the vision here that is shown in the concept was brought to us from the folks with Soapbox Derby. But in our conversations, we've talked about the possibility for other activities that, you know, would have some similar needs or could partner well with that type of activity. And Soapbox Derby folks are open to that as well. So, yeah.
I could say something quickly to that, Sarah.
Bob.
It's a long building so that because it's going to have an indoor racetrack, and there's a certain restriction for the length of that, which needs to be 200 feet long to allow us to do that. And indoor racing has become quite popular here and allows us to run kind of year round, having it indoors. So, and that pretty much takes up the full length of it. And then additionally, we have close to 100 cars now that we're storing in a building at Marion. And so the storage space, believe it or not, for that many cars is quite large, and we plan on growing quite a bit over the next 4 or 5 years as well. So I think that we'll probably use most of that for all that storage and different groups and clubs that would be in there, working on their cars and things like that, giving them space for to be able to come and use this building, pretty much all week long if they wanted.
Bob, could you speak to, we realize the actual spot where the cars are stored and the racetracks may be more exclusive or a controlled environment. Can you speak a little bit more to the front pagoda part? Because I think during our conversations, there was opportunities for that being more of a community public space.
Yeah, sure. So, our vision for that would be maybe a miniature replica of the pagoda that's at the track, if we'd be allowed to do something like that. But the first floor would be sort of a museum that really talks to the history of Soapbox in Indianapolis and in Indiana, which is actually quite significant, that most folks don't really probably know. But so the first floor would be sort of a museum. If you think of it like a children's museum kind of space with maybe some activities, maybe some things there that would bring kids and would be a fun place as well. And then above that, we would have sort of a in the building portion would be, a place for classroom, for STEM activities and things that we're doing with STEM. And then on the third level would be sort of a way to sit out, to watch the races as they're happening, either indoors or outdoors, from the start line there, and would be a place where, the community could come and watch the races from a great view from that spot right there, which I'm excited about.
Thanks, Bob. Any other questions or comments about the racing zone?
Just a question about the dog park location and what type of feedback you've gotten on? I know there was conversation about what part of the park would be most accessible for residential locations, and just any comments you have on that specific spot for it.
Sure. So Katie had a question about the location of the dog park. And earlier on in our conversation, when we were identifying different opportunities and constraints, the dog park was one of those pieces that we were looking at several different locations for, but thinking about some of the considerations about, what's going to be most accessible to folks who are in apartments or nearby homes. The location up here on top of the plateau seems to be the most convenient. Again, it's along Cold Spring Road, which has a trail adjacent to it. And then part of this plan or this vision is to then continue a multi-use trail along the east side of Cold Spring Road as well. And then just thinking about some of the physical constraints of what would need to go into a dog park. A lot of the area down in the floodplain landscape is susceptible to flooding, particularly during the springtime. And so there would be times where that may not be accessible, or it could be very wet and makes for muddy paws and muddy feet, and hard to maintain the turf. So that's kind of the way that we landed on that location for the dog park.
Pastor Shelby had a comment. This planning gives Soapbox Derby 2 plazas. Seems exclusive to them, not so public, and how is it planned to keep it green?
So expanding on the plazas that you're mentioning, Pastor Shelby, the thought here is that the plaza would really support that more public portion of the Soapbox Derby building. I'm using that for a lack of better words, but the pagoda area here that would service as the public space for restrooms and museum. And then down here at the bottom, the finish line, the plaza, while that is used a lot by the Soapbox Derby folks for their setup of their tents and everything, this could also be a plaza then that's used for a variety of events that have been talked about from the river zone. Again, this could serve it sort of as a event hub for the park. And some of the ideas that have been talked about are different racing or fitness events that could happen here. And so staging for that area could certainly happen from that plaza as well. So providing some flexibility for a lot of different activities there.
I think one thing that can be done to help with that too is just maybe another effort at maybe trying to get, and I don't know the numbers on the Soapbox Derby. I know I did it when I was 11, 12, but like making sure that we're engaging the kids that live in the neighborhood so that they are a part of it, so it is actually serving. So I mean, as long as that's, obviously we have to hold people accountable and make sure that's what's being done. But I think to answer or like to make a comment to whoever's question, I think that Pastor Shelby.
We had a number of kids from the community racing this weekend. And the plan is we have a racing team from the community that has kids from the community, well, all of the kids from the community on the team or from the Riverside area, Kessler and over in there.
Great. Thank you.
Is the skate trail considered in or is that zone 2 or zone 3? I don't want to get ahead.
That's zone 3.
Okay.
Katie's doing a nice segue for us to get us into the winter zone. Oh,
question.
yeah.
Actually, this is you already asked this question. I think it's a good question. As far as safety is concerned, will there be on-site like rangers or safety crew in that area, or will that be somewhere else in another part of the park, or has that been considered yet?
We've talked with one of the representatives from the Rangers, and in one of the zones, we've got an area identified to for some of the more operations type of activities that there could be rangers operated out of that area. And so I'll make sure I hit on that when we get to the central nature zone as well.
We often hear that there aren't enough rangers. So in terms of, they just can't spread themselves out among all the parks of the city. So it's something that probably needs to be discussed even more to make sure that, this is a lot of space. So,
yeah.
And I was even thinking and bringing the idea up, I'm thinking with these skateboarding and all these different things, I can see young people trying to have fun and somebody gets hurt. That's a lot of space to get to in a short amount of time. And, we're talking about emergencies and stuff. I didn't know if there would be like checkpoints, at some parks where, you have to stop by here. What would be the procedures or policies in regards to getting into the park? Is it just an open park where people need to walk on, drive on? And then I know we just had a conversation the other day about just monitoring the traffic just a couple blocks east, on Sundays. And so just made me think about this safety.
So have you guys thought about the little boxes, like they have in Marion, emergency boxes, just, within a certain amount of area?
Sure. So there's a couple of questions and thoughts from the group here talking about safety and security. It's a big expanse of a park to get to. And, I know just to share anecdotally, when we had the event back in September, we had rangers here at the event and there was an incident. And so to get to the interior of the park, the rangers would use the pathways. They can use the pathways to get into the park themselves, the rangers, but vehicular access would be limited to those parking lots that you see there. So, but the thought is to have the park accessible and open at these, from these entry points.
There's a comment two comments in the chat. One related to that from Don saying we can use the Greenway 911 GPS markers. And Andre can explain how that works.
Yeah, along our newer greenways, as part of the Greenways master plan, we have emergency markers that have a code that is GPS, that has specific GPS points. So if you call in, let's say, FC 15, which would be Fall Creek on the 15 mile marker per se, that would have a specific GPS point that's in the 911 system, so they know exactly where you're close to. So that type of system could also be used. We're actually working with the group that is going to do the beach by the old Inlet Dam. We created a specific marker, special off marker for that one. So that people can use that as well. So we can use that same type of system here if we want.
I just have a quick question for you. What if you don't have, like, if you're being attacked? Hopefully never, but just say, for instance, if you don't get the set, like if the FCC location would pick up your location automatically.
That meaning if.
Like if I was to call 911, right, and I don't know what marked on it.
We try to make them big enough so you could probably see them from far distance. We can try to come up with a system. I mean, every system has some flaws, but that's the one we worked out for our Cleveland. So we come up with a special system for this location to try to make it as possible visible from long distance. So.
I think the question about the ranger is such a good one. Just even thinking about how long it will take to get to a fully built out plan. That one of the pieces of feedback from our community now is people just get kind of, I'm gonna go for a run in the park, and then they get in the middle and are like, I don't know if this feels right. Like I'm out here alone in the middle of all these golf courses, right now, just to activate it and really feel like there are the resources available for safety as early as possible in this process. For sure, it's a concern.
Bob asked, is there a fence around the dog park? Don responded that the dog park will be fenced. And he also said that it's important to keep the land across from the university well manicured with low turf. Natural prairie grass has a wild natural appearance.
Yeah, and so to hit on that too, all along Cold Spring Road, you'll see a streetscape treatment, which is envisioned to be street trees along Cold Spring Road to define the edge of the park. Turf grass, so some, to Don's point about manicured landscape there versus what the vision is for the central nature zone, which is more natural type of landscape. So as we get into the winter zone, I'm going to continue north of the dog park area. One of the connections from the racing zone up to the winter zone is a treetop walk, which is essentially a boardwalk with some overlooks that's elevated. So you get that sort of squirrels experience up in the treetops here. And again, some points to overlook the floodplain landscape here. And then the winter zone is anchored by a pavilion here that is envisioned to have restroom facilities, some concessions. This could be the place where you do equipment rental to service the skating ribbon that we were touching on just briefly a minute ago. The skating ribbon is essentially a concrete track that is envisioned to be for roller skating during the warmer months, and then it could be refrigerated and have ice on it for the colder months for ice skating. The skating ribbon is a wider type of experience, and then a skating trail is a more narrow path through the woods for a slightly different type of skating experience. There's a play zone in the middle of the skating ribbon that can really activate and provide some fun as folks are skating by. The thought there is that it could include some climbing structures and really cool play features, a self-guided zip line, something very unique in this central area.
Is that water every time there?
No, it's the pink and blue illustration is to denote like a safety, like a rubberized safety surfacing for playgrounds. And then the A, the little keynote A there south of the skating ribbon is envisioned again as another picnic shelter. And, folks have talked about that they see a lot of like skating birthday parties from this area. Again, we need parking up here to support this activity. And so we've added a parking lot off of Cold Spring Road. There are two entrances off of Cold Spring that are bound or marked by entry monuments to mark the park entrances. And then a connection then to the pavilion itself through ramps to get up to the slope. One change that you may notice is that we've added a service entrance here. We in our conversations from our last meeting to now, we talked about how this site would be serviced and maintained. There would be a need for a Zamboni machine to clean off the ice. And so the thought is that that would be housed sort of at the southern point to access the skating ribbon, and it would need its own service drive, so that you'll see that just to the west of the pavilion. There are lots of patio and plaza spaces, the overlook here at this existing sledding hill. One item I wanted to point out here are these switchback trails as well to the south of the sledding hill, and then also up here at the steep sledding hill on the north end of the winter zone. And so while we're using a lot of the existing infrastructure, this existing trail at these locations is very steep, and it provides, or it creates in some ways just a difficult way to get up and down the hill. So we've massaged that and made it a little bit easier to get up and down the hill at easier grades there, and some little seating areas off the side of the trail for folks who need to rest as they go up. You'll see another picnic area here, taking advantage of the views, more plaza spaces at the overlook at the former 18th tee box, where we all stood up there during one of our first steering committee meetings, because you have great views up to the velodrome from there, as well as that can serve then for folks who are taking off for sledding to the north. One other modification that's come about since our last meeting is the embankment slide. Initially, we were exploring ideas for a toboggan run, and in looking at the options that are out on the market and talking with the folks who have some of these features, the operations and maintenance of a vendor-supported facility became a concern for us. And so the vision here for the embankment slide is a long concrete slide. Then again, would not need to have a vendor. There would be no fee associated with it as well. Any thoughts, questions on the winter zone before we leave this area?
I had a question about, so I know there have been some conversations about roller skating, and obviously, I guess one concern that I would have is like, when you look at like a traditional roller skating rink or even ice skating rink, so I can't speak to it. But like typically it's a wider, like, you know, or like I guess when you look at a roller skating rink, like the whole rink around is like the roller skating rink. And then there's like something in the middle, like, is that a potential problem if we do have larger events or larger people, you know, where these, and I don't know how wide this is, but like, is that something that you guys have thought about as far as like how wide and how many people can kind of be rolling around at the same time?
Yeah, so it does look small here on the screen. The width that we're showing for the skating ribbon is about 30 feet wide. So, but this, you're right, this is a different type of experience than like what you would see at a roller skating, like a rink versus a ribbon. And so we've talked with a couple of different skating groups as well to get some of their feedback and input. And you know, one of the feedback that we've also looked at is in the overall master plan of the site. Some of that types of activities have been identified for the southern portion of Riverside Park in the Riverside proper area. Yeah.
Like with the parking lot.
Exactly, yes. And there's, you know, this parking lot here is probably about 110 spaces too. And so there will be some larger parking facilities down at the southern end that could support some of those activities as well.
So like if someone wanted to, I mean, I'm just, I guess that makes sense. I just,
Well, I think about, to your point, Nigel, I guess two things. Riverside High School students cannot wait for a skating ribbon. This cannot come soon enough. Like, word got out about this and they're ready. So we're real excited. I also have a 5-year-old and I live right down the street too. So to think about, is there like,
smaller kids,
a smaller, like the kids can go and they're visible the whole time and they're not going to do the whole long track, but as they're learning.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a couple of different examples out there for that. You know, we've seen smaller, they call it like a skating pond area for smaller kids to start off, get their confidence, and then go out into the ribbon. So there is lots of other examples that we can borrow from here. And that, you know, that level of detail would then be something that would be figured out as Parks is starting to peel off each one of these as individual projects.
Sarah, you mentioned the width of the main part of the ribbon. Can you provide a little context on the overall distance around that section of the?
Sure.
Just so.
Yeah. Phyllis, did you have something to add?
I was just actually measuring out this room. So for the folks that are here in the room, 30 feet is slightly wider than this room.
Okay.
Yeah.
About the whole length of the.
Roughly the width of a track and field track, would be another perspective, and that's why I asked about the
Yeah,
distance
no, that
around.
makes, okay, and I mean, actually, that makes more sense. I mean, because like you said, when we're thinking about a skating rink, you're
Right.
thinking about it being like kind of not as big as that. So
Right.
I'm just trying to conceptualize it in my head and make sure
Sure.
it's like, okay, like, how does this work? And is this, I guess, like, obviously it's functional, you guys know what you're doing, but like, would it be functional for the needs of what the community would want? Or like, is it something that, like, okay, I want to have I don't know, party, like, I want my skate party to be at Riverside Park, outside, you know, like, is that possible? And is that something? So that's just kind of what I'm trying to get in my head. But
Yeah.
that makes sense. So this is like the size of a track, basically.
Yeah, so 30 feet wide. So basically from the back of the room to where Phyllis is standing now, sort of that width. And then the overall length is about a 1/4 mile. So it's, I mean, this is a very large space.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks small here.
Yeah. And that's
But
why I'm
it's
just
very
I'm just
big.
like, okay, wait.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of friends, but I don't think your birthday party is gonna fill up.
It's gonna be a water stay, a 1/4 mile, I'm not thinking how tired I wanna be, just I gotta get back to the end. No, there won't be. We got a couple chicks, don't worry, get
So it's not like something where you could, I mean, I guess you could, because I'm just thinking about like, you know, where do you set up a DJ? Is the sound gonna, now I'm thinking like, okay, does that sound reach to the other side?
No, it's too big.
I don't know, I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm trying to, look, you guys don't want to see me on skates, but I have friends that are into it. You guys will not see
We
me
want
on
to
this
see
skate
you on the
ribbon
skates.
ever, right? You won't see me ice skating.
Don't say
roll.
ever, come on,
I'll be like, no. But I'm just trying to conceptualize it because this is something that like, when I talk about the neighborhood to people, I'm just like, yo, this is amazing. Like, this is what is potentially gonna happen here. And so people light up when you say, yeah, there's gonna be an outdoor skate park or an outdoor skating rink or whatever, you know, people light up when they hear things like that. And so I'm just trying to make sure it makes sense in my mind so I can explain it to people.
Thank you. Yeah, good. Other questions, comments? Yeah, sorry.
So we've transitioned from a toboggan run to an embankment slide. I don't have a good picture in my mind on how that would be utilized.
Okay. So there's a question about the embankment slide, and I'm going to scoot over to some of our representative images here. And the ones here under 3 for winter zone show some of those elements that, you know, folks may not be as familiar with. So the thought on the embankment slide, you'll see there right underneath the play zone photo. It's something, it's a concrete element that follows the slope of the ground. So, you know, this could be usable really any time of the year. You know, if there was snow on it, yes, you would not be able to use it then. But I think in our milder, we're getting very mild winters now. So I would say an element like this is usable year round. And because, you know, as we're thinking about materials too, the concrete, it doesn't absorb heat like a lot of the metal slides do. So it would be, again, something that folks could use during all times of the day.
How do you go down it?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm.
It's a slide.
Like very smooth.
Mhm,
You have
yeah.
to make it very smooth concrete.
Mhm.
How high up will the treetop walk be?
So that's envisioned to be, you know, we're up 40 feet from the floodplain landscape here on top of the hill. So we would stay roughly at that elevation. You know, we might come down a little bit, but the treetop walk is envisioned to be accessible. So at grades that meet ADA. So you're up in the air, and it would be a very unique type of experience up there. Okay. We'll continue.
His hand up. I
Oh,
didn't know if
sorry.
you still had a question. Kevin Hardy.
Kevin Hardy, do you have a question?
Head down mute. No, I don't have any question. I maybe my previous one was still up.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, we'll continue to move north of Crooked Creek now. into the zone 4, the wetland education zone. And again, this is a very unique landscape in the park because it was never a golf course. So it's quite a different type of landscape. This is the area of the former Lake Sullivan. And, you know, as we learned in our data inventory collection and then in conversation with some other folks who are very familiar with this area and the plans that have been done over the years, Crooked Creek is a very sinuous, meandering stream, and it had been dammed up over time, and it gets a lot of sedimentation from the watershed coming down here. So it kept silting in. They would have to dredge it, and it just never really worked as a lake. So the vision is to let that landscape be what it wants to be, this very meandering river course through here, or creek course through here. But there's a need to provide some connectivity back to the central nature zone and the portion of the park down south of Crooked Creek. And so historically, there had been a vehicular bridge over Crooked Creek in this central location that's envisioned as a pedestrian bridge only in this concept here to connect you from one side of the creek to the other. And then over here near the nature center, a boardwalk to get you across to the wetland education zone as well. A series of boardwalks, overlooks, and trails wind you around this marsh landscape here. This is envisioned to have a lot of educational signage to talk about different landscapes and issues around waterways. It connects you up to the existing parking lot here at the cycloplex with the trailhead and wayfinding signage, and then builds off of the existing bike facilities up here at the velodrome. So there's an existing skate park here currently. The master plan expands on that through a skate park expansion, as well as a pump track or a coasting type experience for bikes through the pump track that partners really well with the skate park location there. A plaza here with a picnic shelter serves both of them. And then coming up to the north on the trail system to the service road, Tony Johnson from Indy Parks had shared with us that there were some illegal dumping and activity concerns along the service drive. So we proposed to limit vehicular traffic through some decorative gates across that service road. And then that just makes that more of a pedestrian corridor. The parking areas then are re-envisioned as wetland overlooks. So plaza spaces with sun shelters that could also include some signage as well.
Can I just add one thing on that one?
Sure.
Just a question mark on those entrances that come in that are on that along I-65 where you're going to put in those wetland overlooks. Could you put in those kind of yellow barriers that keep vehicular traffic going in, keep it from going in?
Oh.
Yeah.
That you could still remove them if you needed them for some event or something. Yeah. Because it's just a horrible, I mean, I don't think it's going to stop. It's been going on since 1981.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's really ugly, and Tony and his crew have done a lot to just, it's a management job. Just a one-off deal.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, bollards or a gate to actually go, a structure across.
We have gates on other stuff, but not on those
Okay.
two entrances on Cold Spring around the parkway.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that feedback. And then we come down to White River Parkway on the east side here, connect in to a greenway that would be located along the west side of the White River Parkway. There's one existing on the east side, and we wanted to complement that with one on the west side of the parkway for access to the park. And then the grist mill interpretive site, which is essentially a trail down to a plaza space that could have benches and educational signage there as well. So we'll pause there for any comments or questions on the wetland education zone.
Yeah, I have a question about the boardwalks and the treetop walks. Again, just in regards to safety, will it be impossible? It looks a little open, and I'm just thinking the young people like to climb, they can just go into this park. I remember being a kid going over all over Riverside Park. It won't be possible for anybody to like try to climb or hang off any of these, you know, any of these, the treetop walk, nor the boardwalk. Like that would be impossible for somebody to try to do that, right?
So the boardwalks would be something that's lower to the ground. And, you know, there's certain, again, safety criteria and accessibility criteria that as designers we have to follow to limit some of that possibility. And so that's what would be followed in terms of design for those elements.
Just something to think about.
Impossible is a pretty tough standard.
Yeah.
Following all safety standards would definitely be vital.
And I'm not saying that safety standards wouldn't be followed. I'm saying that just being mindful of it was the openness of this park. And, you know, I'm seeing this treetop walk, and then I'm looking at this boardwalk, what looks like marsh or water or things that, you know, I just think that could be, we should be mindful of the area. It's going to be open and it's so close to these two different, these communities. So young people can go, we want young people to be open, right? I mean, I love the design of it, but I just want to make sure that it protects people from themselves sometimes, especially younger people who will take chances, who like to climb off, you know, we all have children, climb off the steps, beds. If I see this, I see my son who's 4 years old, we have to tell him to get down.
Sure.
And if we have families and young people who come to this park who may not have that support person or influence to tell them to get down, I want to make sure that we don't, you know, that's all it takes is one person trying to climb over that, fall in and hurt themselves, and they don't have a phone to use their green dot or whatever green space code.
So one of the things I jokingly say is I now working for parks, try to keep people from doing in parks what I did as a young person. So, I mean, it's just facts. And we can talk on the side and I can tell you some of the things. And I hate to say it this way, we can't design for every stupid thing somebody like me would have done. We try, but it's, what he says, impossible. So we will, the designers that we pick, most of them are top, good, excellent designers. We'll do everything we can, but you know, there's that 1% chance somebody just decides to do something that they shouldn't. The only way to, I guess, design for that is not to put it in at all. So,
and that's what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying, though.
I'm saying we're dealing with children who will take those chances, and I
took those chances. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That scares me. I mean, I love the design of the park, and if we're talking about a park that is patrolled and secured, like, you know, if we're gonna have this option of these kind of things, I'm saying it has to be fenced off, gated, where kids can't climb through it, and it has to be higher to where you can walk through it, but no one can hurt themselves. But I would defer to the rest of the group's opinion on that, but I just think as a parent, as a person representing Riverside community, and those young people who will be frequently using this park, I think if there's a way that we can include a measure to protect our young people from themselves at times, I think we should, and not just assume that they won't take a risk that we would have taken. You know?
Well, let's assume that they can read, and maybe signage will be very important and let you know the dangers of the areas that you're approaching at a certain age, or, you know, advising the parents, because me as a parent of 60, and I have 5 boys and a girl, they're everywhere doing everything.
Yes, ma'am.
But they do read. So, you know, it's still one that might just feel like, forget that sign, I'm gonna still try it. But then it's also the responsibility of the parents to know your kids and what they're doing. So it don't always fall in the park. You don't want to limit certain great things because you just got a parent with a shadow. Like he said, I was horrible in the park. We didn't have signage, and we had the old school slides where you you know, you burn yourself 100 piano just to have fun. But at the same time, even, you know, with being misguided or nobody in attention to you, you're gonna do what you want to do. So I think it also falls on the parent to make sure that they're not in dangerous spaces to, you know, be vulnerable.
I think I'm looking at it from a school standpoint, you know, being in a school building. And I just look at it as our responsibility to plan, of course, for the majority. Now, for those one-off, somebody who climbed a 6 foot, 8 foot fence or whatever to get over, that's different. But I'm saying with these openings, this opening with this marsh area, that looks, I mean, I'm just.
Well, this is just a replica, right?
Well, again, going back to some of the safety guidelines,
Yes.
there are requirements that say you have to have a rail, a cross rail, so that people can't, so it's not just an open, like fence area, so people can get off into that space. There's also requirements that say you have to have, the opening has to be high enough so that if a kid sticks his head in, he can get it back out, and that's not a strict. So there are
Yes, ma'am.
guidelines in place that make for safe spaces, but also, you know, it's a fine balance of like making it safe, but not fencing and gating and everything off, because then that doesn't feel welcoming either. So it's a real fine balance.
It was scary though, because it doesn't have like, this is just a replica, right? You said that Indy Park has standards where they have to make sure, like she said, it's a certain amount of room in between each one of these
Yeah,
spaces.
those are
because-
national standards.
Okay.
Yeah, they're national standards.
Well, the good thing also is that we're not the first ones to build these, you know, so
Mhm.
we've got tons of examples from other
Yeah.
park agencies that have built these that we can look at and find out how they've made them as safe as possible too.
Yeah. Great. So for those of you virtually, I apologize if you can't hear all of the comments, but great conversation on safety concerns for some of these elements. All right, we'll move then into the central nature zone. And so the building that we're in today is what is called the Nature Center on our graphic here. So that would anchor the central nature zone. The concept here shown on the page is a 20,000 square foot nature center. It's served by a parking lot, again, that builds off of the existing parking lot here. And there are places for nature play. So some different types of playgrounds with boulders and logs, you know, different types of materials so that kids can have some different types of play experiences, test their limits, again, in a safe environment. And then demonstration gardens, which are envisioned to be areas for folks to walk through and see native plants and get information of how to install these types of areas, gardens in their own home landscape. There is a series of picnic shelters in this zone as well that are served by the expanded parking areas along a winding entrance drive. And the entrance drive today cuts across here. And so we've bumped that down for a winding park entry experience, but that then also provides area for an archery range that's envisioned for this side of the east side of the parking lot. The archery range would be served by a building, so that would have where you do your equipment rentals. And then on the north side of the archery building is room for a maintenance building. As we were talking with the maintenance and park ranger folks, you know, they expressed the desire and need to have a building where they could run some of their operations out of, have some equipment here on site, and a maintenance yard that you'll see there in the concept. Moving further into the central nature zone, again, you'll see the greenway along White River Parkway. That's accommodated by narrowing the road width of White River Parkway Drive. Right today, it's very wide. It's wider than it needs to be. And so we can reclaim some of that space by narrowing the pavement, putting a trail up there. That helps with some traffic calming along the parkway as well.
I got a question about that.
And then
The traffic calming, because when you get to 30th Street, if you ever use it, there's no calming to getting out of there. Are they gonna put any type of like yellow light or anything? Because if people are parking along the side, they're gonna have a hard time getting out.
Sure. So there's a question about traffic calming at White River Parkway and 30th Street. And as Katie mentioned earlier, that's a sort of a tricky intersection. So
Yeah, I'm with you. We want a left turn light right there. Yeah.
yeah, so
For sure.
any type of like traffic light there, would need to be studied from a traffic standpoint to understand what the counts are and what the effects would be if there's a light added there. So in the central nature zone, though, that's very much a passive recreation center. One of the pieces of feedback that we heard in our survey was that folks really like the ability to walk and bike on trails, even existing today. They like the fact that there's a nice nature experience right here. So again, we've provided a lot of east-west connections to connect these trails. People can do a lot of looping walk experiences. And you'll see this kind of green yellow color on the rendering is to indicate prairie. As we talked with some experts in natural landscapes and prairie, they advised us that this would be a taller prairie planting that would naturally occur through here. It's hard to keep the planting short since this area receives floodwaters often. And so we had to think about the balance between tall prairie plantings and people in the landscape and, again, feelings of safety and security. So we're trying to balance that through the lighter green areas are more manicured turf spaces so that you have good sight lines across the landscape. And then also through the trails, the vision is that they would be mowed. They're being mowed today, like 10 feet on either side, so that as people walk through the prairie landscape, they're not feeling overwhelmed. And then the trails also provide a nice fire break for burn management, which is a technique that folks can use to maintain the prairie. In the center part of the central nature zone is the old railroad mounds, the big four railroad mounds that cut through the landscape. And the vision is to take advantage of those again for getting above that prairie landscape, being able to see the long view across that area, gathering spaces with shelters, and art is envisioned for those. And then this last nature play area here is that the mound that you see out in the land that has the Riverside sign on it here. And then we come back to the very beginning. So we'll pause there for any questions about the central nature zone or any thoughts on anything else.
That's a question. This is back up in the wetland. What is the grist mill interpretive site?
There's a question from Ron about the grist mill interpretive site. When we were doing our data collection, one of the things that we looked for was archaeological information. And so through our archaeological records, we found that because Crooked Creek and the White River join there, that was a good location for a grist mill that was located there hundreds of years ago. And so that could be a place where, again, it's a gathering spot to talk about the history of the site. And so that was the thought for that element. Yeah.
What's a grist mill? I'm sorry, I'm saying I've never heard of it.
So a grist mill is a lot of times it's a building with a water wheel because the water provides power for pounding of grain into flour.
Oh. Right on. Okay, I didn't know what it was.
So again, it talks about, the area's agricultural history. I think, maybe in one of our first meetings, we talked about this lake, the former Lake Sullivan area was also used as a tree nursery several decades ago. It was a fish hatchery. So this portion of the site has a very interesting history in of itself because it was never the golf course. Other questions?
So you can make flour at the gristmill.
Addie Gristmill, yeah, it would.
At this particular.
That, well, it's not there anymore,
okay.
yeah, but that's what they did when it was there.
Has there been an organization identified that would own the further detail and the planting plan for the nature zone? Similar to how one of the activation organizations for the racing section is the gang from the Soapbox Derby.
Sure, so one of the groups that we've talked with is Indie Land Stewardship. So they're a division within DPW that is entrusted with the stewardship of natural landscapes in Indianapolis. And so they've been advising us on, the plants that we should expect there. And so that could be one of the organizations that would lead the charge on that. Looks like we have a comment in the chat. Oh, thank you, Michelle, for joining us. Okay, any other thoughts or questions? From our virtual folks, any thoughts or questions?
I would like to point out that I still really like the treetop walk.
Ron really likes the treetop walk.
And so is the neighborhood. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Yeah, there are Ewoks that are waiting. Somebody's been sending me Ewoks on my phone ever since the last meeting.
Look at
Don't
that.
shake your head. I know who you are too.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions then about the plan, we also have been charged with, developing costs then to provide budget information for Indy Parks. And with the development of the budget, this will allow them then to, as the next step, as Julie mentioned early on, to move from conceptual planning into construction documentation for individual pieces of the plan. And that's based on funding available to the department, but then it also identifies a lot of different opportunities for partnerships that the city can partner with other organizations in fundraising, because they're not going to be able to do this plan all in of its own. So we have organized the cost then into each of the zones. And so starting with the river zone, again, that includes the pavilion, the parking lot, the trails, the entry overlook, and some of the traffic calming along the parkway. The river zone is approximately $8.7 million. Then moving up to the racing zone, which includes the RC track, the plaza spaces, the Soapbox Derby building and parking lot, fitness trail, entry plaza, dog park. That zone is approximately $9.4 million. The winter zone, including the pavilion, all of the patio spaces, the switchback trails, the Ewok treetop walk.
Thank you.
The skating ribbon and play zone, shelters that accommodate this area, embankment slide, etc. That comes in at $26.6 million. The wetland education zone, which is all of the skate park expansion, the pump track, the boardwalks and trails, overlook signage, is $7.8 million. And then finally, the central nature zone, which again is all of the trails, the demonstration gardens, the nature play, the archery, buildings associated with the archery range, the picnic shelters. We're looking again at a 20,000 square foot new build of the nature center. That is $27.5 million. And so then the total cost for the vision here on the screen is $80 million.
How many?
How many?
Yes.
80? 80. So again, I think that just highlights the fact, Julie mentioned earlier that there's some funding available to the Parks Department for some implementation, but it highlights the fact that this will provide an opportunity for some partnerships for fundraising and partnering in the development of the park as well.
Any more fundraisers now?
Yeah, did you?
See, I'm not being funny on the technical side because our parks actually reflect our civic values. So our parks are drastically underfunded compared to other cities of this size. We give about $25 per person in tax dollars. A city of this size should be like 75, 78. Now what I see is we go and complain to the park staff. When the reality is that is city council's responsibility. They service us as citizens. And so that's our responsibility in looking at this plan. When we say 80 million, it is doable. Millennium Park in Chicago was 250 million. And for some of those who were part of the park planning process for this from the beginning, we went up there and they told exactly how they got it done. And so we look at this, we also kind of have to look at ourselves and say, so how do we get it done? Not the fact that you all are about to tell us we got $5 million, because I don't really go that far on here. But how do we get to that 80 million? So we're then not talking about, well, we've got to create these public-private partnerships, which usually means the public loses out more than the partner, or that we've got to look on here and be like, well, maybe the dog park, because the dog park is the money maker. Most of this other stuff is not going to make money. Broad Ripple Park, dog park, 2 acres, $65,000 a year. So I look at this first thing, I'm like, is that 4 acres is necessary? Because then I would advocate that we create a requirement that all funding from this park that is generated by this park goes to Tony and the park staff to create the programming that we want. But they can never say that. They're staff. That's our responsibility. So I would encourage that you look at this. Next step, we should be talking about how do we move from a parks department, which means city controls it, to a parks district, which means that we actually have a taxing body, that all that funding from that 0.5% of tax dollars goes directly to care for our parks, because we're never going to get it done at the rate that we watch the budget cut anywhere from 10 to 20% every year for parks for 15, 20 years. They're operating on a flip-flop. What do we really think this flip-flop will get us? Or maybe what we have to redo is rethink how we get to that 80 million before 2 decades. Because you're talking about your son when to go skiing, skating, your grandchildren are going to get to it at this rate. That's the only people who are going to be able to do this. So that's just the way that I think, just as from having come from a city that has fabulous parks, that we have to restructure how we think about all of this, or these things just stay on the paper, and they do not have to. Those are our values playing out in public, and we look at those budgets. All that stuff is a reflection of our values about how do we care for the parks, and how do we ensure the work gets done, not just on this paper. Sorry, that's always my public service announcement. Everywhere I go, I drive around the city and talk about the parks.
But is there anyone that's actually actively doing that advocacy work and that lobbying that needs to happen with the city council?
Turn around, look at everybody in this room should be doing that work. I'm doing that work right now by telling you, folks, we got to do more than this. I'm doing that work by taking us up to Chicago where we did it so we can see, actually, this is what happens when citizens come together and say, let's change city ordinance to reflect what we need our parks to do for us. Not the other way around. You mad, don't go talk to Tony, because that's what I see happen. Tony, Yolanda, they get yelled at all the time. Call Bob. They're like, Bob, what is going on with this? Call whoever is on the other side of the park. What is going on with this? That's where that conversation has to begin.
That public safety budget, it keeps going up every year, you know.
Thank you.
Just need to hear
But guess what? 3-4 years ago, they had a hold, oh, who was that mayor? Still, Phyllis was there with me.
Which
What
one?
was- You know what I'm talking about? We were at that meeting.
Ballard.
And Ballard sat there and said, this is the game plan for what you have to do if you want to raise your budgets in the park. He laid it out at the whole, what was it called? It's down at Indy every year. That year was about parks. And he gave a game plan for community on how to get more money for the parks. He laid it out. He said it. He was like, this is what has to be done. All it has to do is citizens come along and pick it up. I hope everybody online heard that too. Type it up for them, Sarah. They did.
It'll be in the minute.
I was gonna say,
Oh.
I think they heard. Other thoughts or comments?
Are we on the agenda item of early activation ideas? Is that where we're at?
Yeah,
I lost track.
yeah, we're about to be there.
Yes, we
I
can be.
think,
So,
yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna close this down and Phyllis is gonna lead us in a discussion about early activation ideas.
my form of leading is going to be to ask for input. So you heard what the budget is. You've gotten the overview of the proposed facilities and amenities. You know that there's some funding that's coming through sooner than later. What Indy Parks needs to know and understand are what are your priorities? So let's just have a session of brainstorming. One of the things that, a few things that have already come through from our public meetings, neighborhood meetings, are events around fitness. There was
Questions about like art classes or
Right.
nature-based classes. Could that be done here?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So do you have any other ideas for things that you would like to see happening sooner than later? Just start, you can type things in the chat if you're virtual, or just unmute yourselves.
We would love to see a 5K, 10K, or a lot of those, a series of those in this space, just as an investment in getting people comfortable using the trails and feeling supported in there. Be cool to see a series of some sort that wasn't just a one-off.
Katie mentioned a series of running type events, and Phyllis is gonna include those in the chat so everybody can see.
There was, go ahead. No, we talked about this a few years ago about a way to incorporate all the parts of the park so that more people get their Riverside experience. So this was more like a family race, but it kind of, it works off of your triathlon, your Spartan race, your 5K or whatever, but it was something, let's say you started Kevin Hardy's Friends of the White River. We have a river in our park. So it would start off, the race would start off, actually using the river. And then we get to a certain point and like we're saying, we're up at the velodrome or whatever, and you get off and you have to bike and you have to go. And for it to be a family event, so it'd be like maybe 2 adults and 2 kids. And then throughout the year, as a way for the park to get more utilization, and also, people doing maybe paying for more classes, or either paying for classes or getting free classes, so they could be taking safety classes and biking at the velodrome. To be able to do this race, they would have to enroll in some of the events or the functions that we have at them. So it would be us going to and spending time with Friends of White River, for instance, or Indy Parks with the rowing. Then we would spend time with the velodrome. We spend time with, depending on what's going to be here at the park. So I would love to see that idea, because I remember myself, Phyllis, Kevin Hardy, and a lot of other folks. It was, I think the momentum was building, but then we kind of stopped for a minute to changed course and then we never got back to it. I'll make sure we bring that back.
Thank you. What other thoughts?
I think a way, at least to get people to start using the space, I think more events like what we did last summer, fall, I guess.
Like the open house.
Like the open house, something, things like that. Like I mean, like I said, selfishly, I host events, and so I would love to do something in the space. I mean, even before we get it up and running, I mean, maybe even talk to, I know the Juneteenth, there's a big Juneteenth celebration that's happening. So maybe reaching out to them to see if, hey, like during this event, we're gonna be doing tours of the park, just to kind of get people to see it. Like, and these are like, I mean, this is gonna be citywide, so a bunch of people from everywhere, but just kind of be like, hey, this is what we're thinking about, just kind of something similar to what we did last summer, I think would be cool. Or even kind of reaching out to them to see how they would, I don't know if they want to, I think they're doing it in a specific part already, but seeing how they could incorporate, you know, some of this presentation or anything, or you guys can have a table into that, what's going on.
Oh, at the Juneteenth event over, yeah.
That's gonna be happening in Riverside.
Yeah.
But the reason I brought up events, and I think this might be something that's easy, at least in my mind, is like a shelter or like some kind of event space, like that we can do concerts and different things at, and maybe, like I said, just like they're doing at the Taggart, kind of have some concert series, just to familiarize people with the park. You know, I think that could be really cool. And I think all people always down for a good concert.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Great.
I do want to remind you that the temporary pieces that are currently installed as part of that early activation that started in September, they're going to be, the de-installation is starting on Friday. So I know, so get out there and see them. Okay, the first piece that will be de-installed will be the dancing pink sculpture, and then the next one that we know of that's going to get scheduled is the flower that's out here.
So I have a question, because I remember, you know, we were all part of the original steering committee for the master plan. And I remember, again, when we went up to Millennium Park, we saw like the beams and so on and so forth, these great, which I think that was one thing that sold on the residents, you know, as to seeing something like that in this area. Would this area be where those kind of things, or are we talking about the park proper?
I think that really it's definitely, this area is part of that sort of public art potential, and even the park proper, really. It just depends on where Indy Parks really ultimately feels like they want to put that. Those pieces are big ticket, very expensive. Like if Indy Parks were to buy Petit Passe, the dancing pink figure, that's a $65,000 sculpture. But we were able to include it as an early action item because it was just sort of a rental. We were borrowing it for a little while. So
Ron, also in the total park master plan, we did have someone that's in this room do park programming that was in that park master plan.
Right.
That called out types of art, whether it's performance art, sculptural.
Yes, you.
I just over here. I'm giving Phyllis a ride.
So I just want to point that out.
Oh, okay.
Art was thought about for the whole park.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I remember what the art was. I was just wondering if this was the area we were talking about, or was it park proper or both?
We talked about it in the whole park.
The whole park, okay.
Because if you remember, South Grove is also going to go away as a golf course.
Right.
Part of that is going to be a community green for open events, and then the other side was sports. But
Yes, that's why I thought it was all, I'm not looking at it, I thought it was all sports.
but yeah, there's a whole art programming piece that was effectively done by somebody.
So is the art going, I mean, permanently, or are we gonna reinstall things?
So Nigel just asked if the current pieces of art are going away. Yes, they are going away. It was always meant to be a temporary thing. And in fact, the de-installation was initially scheduled for December, but the artists were okay with having us extend the installation period until now.
without additional payment.
Yeah, they didn't ask for any additional
Additional
monies for that. So yeah, it's a matter of budget, how soon we can get funds together for
Is there
more art.
anything that is there any potential partnerships with Arts Council, like potentially, or like, I mean, I don't know how much you guys all know about like Gang Gang and Molly and Allen and what they're doing, but like that could be something, I mean, that they can be involved in. And I know they're always looking for how they can kind of engage the arts community with other projects that are going on. So I mean, just a thought.
Yeah. Great thought. You have a comment?
For maybe more spread in terms of engagement with schools and community members close by, work days that just have specific things. It's not the same size or scope in terms of development, but we did a lot of community gatherings to come in and help us with invasive plants or whatever. And a lot of those people came back in connection to it over time.
Yeah, that's a great
Especially
thought.
young people can do it. And it's like, we just have to figure out the right kind of things.
Yeah.
But they're gonna get to see it. And get to be
Yeah,
part
that's
of it.
a great idea, because I know a lot of high schools have like community service hour
They do.
requirement, so
They do.
yeah, great
At
thought.
high school level, you can get a lot more.
Yeah.
And so,
And just to piggyback off what I was thinking of, connecting with the schools in this area, but also just as field trips, many schools that I work at, we, right, call it the, what is that park over where they put the basketball goal in the middle of the different designs.
100 acres.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I know many of the schools use that as like a nature walk, and especially now with the COVID, I think it's a great way to get outside and just to get familiar with the space. Maybe, I don't know if we can stage it in a way to where they can kind of see what is coming. But then also, the young lady that stated about the 5K, I know for years there's been this bike ride that take up 30th Street and walk, you know, so maybe those kind of events can take place. And even the high school cross country, those type of events can take place in the park now since it has so much space. But so we just get families and young people just, you know, accustomed to what's coming.
Great. Good ideas.
Did you have something to add? I mean, related to the bikes, Nate?
Not on bikes, surprisingly. But where my mind goes is a lot of effort up to this point has been given to infrastructure planning. And what I'm hearing we're slowly needing to transition to is thinking through identifying the long list of user groups that we want to actually bring into the space to use all this cool stuff. And also, along with that, we need to be working to identify the programming organizations that can facilitate connecting a user group with creating the type of experience. So that's actually why I asked the question about the nature zone earlier, was because it's one thing to have an organization help design what plants and trees get placed there, and that'll be great. But I'm guessing that land stewardship probably isn't going to be the strongest organization to actually have naturalists walking a field trip through the space and doing the education. I'd love to be wrong, I don't know. But identifying those organizations that can facilitate the programming and starting to get them involved with small bite sizes, pieces of either work projects or small tastes of what programming could look like, I think is what in my mind is one of the crucial next steps for our work.
Yeah.
So land stewardship does in other parks do nature walks and programming. And they're also a part of a larger team. Indy Parks has naturalists at Eagle Creek, Holiday Park, that we can bring to do some of that you're talking about. So yeah, that could be done.
Yeah,
we're already doing it. The city's already doing it. It's just figuring out when we want to do it here, as long as they're not doing something somewhere.
Yeah.
Tony.
And there's a plan to hire a naturalist actually to be housed here that's in the works right now. So hopefully that's coming soon to do outreach
That's great.
and major outreach with the schools and the community.
That's great. Yeah, I know, that was part of the reason we wanted to bring y'all back to the clubhouse, because, we had our first meeting here as a steering committee back in August, and it looked quite different. It still looked very much like a clubhouse, but, I think, on behalf of the Indy Park team, we were excited to get everyone back here to see the progress that has happened here, to get Tony's office here. There's an office space like he was talking about for a naturalist. And so, it's taking time, but the steps are being made, so very exciting.
Don Colvin made a comment saying that Indy Parks has numerous naturalists as part of their team, and that the dollars available, you're referring, Don, to the 11 million.
Yeah.
They have to be used for infrastructure that has a lifespan of 15 or more years. Thank you, Don.
Any other thoughts or questions? Well, how many folks have been here since the big event in September, or our first steering committee meeting?
I've been to the park.
Yeah, I've been back. Awesome. That's great. Well, as you heard Phyllis mention, some of the art is going away. So now is your last chance to see the art. And it's been, it's been interesting to see as the seasons are changing, how the landscape changes. And this is really kind of year 2 of this site not being a golf course. So there's a lot of nice changes to see in place from that, so. No, okay.
Well, thanks everyone for your comments.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time today. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be posting the graphic on the website. We'll be sharing a recording of our meeting on the website. So if there are questions from your community or your neighbors, you can always point them back to the website as well for more information.
Does the plan need to be adopted by anyone, or is it, what's our level of, this is what's being proposed versus this is what?
We are gonna take it to the park board,
Okay.
so they will have the approval, or I know, just kind of like, we give it your blessing,
Okay.
kind of thing.
Do you want us to start celebrating it on social media or not do it?
We were waiting to post it until we met with you, both of our steering committees. So now, once it gets onto the website, yeah, we're ready to celebrate.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Our families will love it.
Good.